Our guest today, a coach that improved pretty much every hockey club he ever coached, won multiple championships, and one of Canada's all-time great sports writers, Mike Keenan, Scott Morrison, Joe Tilley's Great Canadian Sports Show. Coming up! All right, let me introduce you to today's great guest. He was born in Bowmanville, Ontario. He played hockey at St. Lawrence University. He played at the University of Toronto, where he won a national championship. He was drafted by the WHA's Vancouver Blazers, played for the Roanoke Valley Rebels in pro, coached the University of Toronto to a national title, coached the Rochester Americans to a Calder Cup title. He won a KHL championship. He coached in the NHL with Philadelphia, Chicago, New York Rangers, St. Louis, Vancouver, Boston, Florida, and Calgary. He was a Jack Adams Award winner as Coach of the Year. He coached 2 Canada Cup champions. He guided the New York Rangers to their first Stanley Cup victory in 54 years. Iron Mike Keenan. And from Toronto, over 40 years as a sports writer, former sports editor for the Toronto Sun, author of numerous books, former president of the Professional Hockey Writers Association, a commentator on Hockey Night in Canada, executive producer of Hockey for Sportsnet, a member of the Ontario Sports Hall of Fame, the Associated Press North American Award winner. He received Hockey Hall of Fame's Elmer Ferguson Award. Scott Morrison, welcome to the program, gentlemen. Mike, I think that's the first time we've had a 2-pager for the introduction. A pretty impressive resume. That's awesome. Yeah.
There's
And,
one
of
little
course-
part that you forgot, though, that Scott was my boss on Sportsnet.
Oh yeah, Scott was the boss. Yeah, for a while there when you were executive producer over there, right? So that was pretty cool. Head of hockey for Sportsnet. So now you guys have inked the new book, and just finished reading it this week. There it is, Iron Mike: My Life Behind the Bench. Excellent book. Now, Jay Greenberg was originally had started this book, if I have this correct, and Jay unfortunately passed away. Tell us what happened and why you decided to pick up the ball here, Scott.
Well, Jay had started. He and Mike had talked about it for many years, and he finally got convinced Mike it was time to do the book. And Jay asked me if I would sort of do the pre-edit before it was sent off to the publisher. And so Jay had written a bunch of chapters, and because I'd known Mike as dating back to 1979 and covered all his various stops at the NHL and Canada Cups and whatnot. Jay asked me if I would do that pre-edit because I could fill some of the gaps in and maybe add to some of the stories, and we were going along that way. And then during the COVID of all things, Jay contracted West Nile virus, and with almost a year to the day after falling sick, he passed on. And so we talked about continue on with the project, and the publisher certainly wanted to write the book, and we felt it was important to move on and get it done. So it was sad that obviously that Jay passed on, because he and Mike had a long history as well. Jay and I knew each other for 40 odd years. So tragic how it unfolded in the beginning, but we managed to get it to the finish line, and we paid tribute to Jay in the book.
And Mike, there's no doubt in your mind that Scott was the right guy to finish this.
Well, I'm appreciative of Scott's skills, certainly, and the Hall of Fame writer did an excellent job for us, and he captured enough of the essence of my career. He poked the bear enough, like he just said I was a little bit reluctant, but he has known me long enough to be inquisitive and find the stories that we thought would be enjoyed by a reader. So it worked out well. And then, of course, we had Mark Messier do the forward. He was very generous in his comments as well. But I'm fortunate that Scott, and I'm appreciative that Scott picked up the project.
Yeah, you and Mark got along well. That was, documented well in the book, and yeah, so it was terrific. Anyway, the finished product is awesome. So, and you guys have collaborated before. You on the Iron Mike Keenan podcast during COVID. You guys worked together on that particular project. So you definitely, well, I mean, you've had history since 1979. So where did that begin, Scott? That's a long
So I
time.
first, yeah, it is a long time, and Mike was coaching Peterborough at the time, and at that time for the World Junior Tournament, the defending Memorial Cup champions represented Canada at the World Junior. So Mike had taken over Peterborough. I guess Gary Green had coached the previous year with the team, and he'd moved on to Washington in the NHL, Hershey, and then Washington. And so they had before the team left for the tournament in Finland, they had a meet the press at the old hot stove club at Maple Leaf Gardens, and so I was assigned to cover that. I was working at the Toronto Sun at the time, and that's when I first met Mike. And then, ultimately after that, we both quote unquote graduated to the pro ranks, and our paths
Right.
crossed many, many times.
So, Mike, going to take you back a little bit. Growing up in Oshawa and Whitby, I spent a lot of years in Oshawa myself and raised my family there. Seemed to have a lot of connections to that Whitby Dunlops team that won the World Championship back in 1958. Your coach, your dad's cousins, Harry Sinden. That's a small hockey world right there, isn't it?
It really was, and they became very famous in the hockey world by beating the Soviet Union in Oslo. Harry Sinden was the captain. My dad's first cousins were O'Connors. Doug Williams, who went on to coach me when I became a minor hockey league player and became a principal in Oshawa as well. So there was a lot of history. I can recall many, many afternoons or evenings where my father would invite the players over to our house, and they would hang out because of the relationship with the O'Connors fundamentally. And I don't know if we put this in the book or not, Scott, but I was a stick boy for a while for the Whitby Dunlops and had access to the dressing room. That was kind of an interesting experience. And back then, senior hockey, as you look at that roster, Frank Bonello, Harry Sinden, as we mentioned, Long John Henderson was a goalie, a lot of players that had played pro. And at that time, there were a lot of pro players come into the senior A loop because there was only 6 teams and there wasn't the availability for players to move into the NHL as there is today. So it was a fun experience for a young kid.
Yeah, senior hockey was a big deal. Of course, Whitby was a small town, like 4,000 people back then, I think it was. And to have that kind of success in the hockey world was phenomenal.
Yeah, well, there was a great relationship with the factory at that time, the Dunlop factory. They sponsored
Right.
the team, and that's how they were able to put a team in such a small community. But that wasn't uncommon throughout Canada at the time. There was many small communities had senior A teams and good teams, and the players had to find jobs, and sometimes it was by the sponsors. But another great player I can recall now is Bobby Addersley,
The
who
mayor.
probably the mayor of Whitby probably could have played in the NHL for sure, but it was a risky business, and they didn't pay them much then. So Bob made uh, his income and started Addersley Tire, and probably made more than an NHL player at the time and played senior.
Right. So I might as well just play senior and own Addersley Tire and be quite financially sound. Okay, but you were a heck of an athlete. Okay, high school athlete of the year in grade 9. What were the sports that you played at that particular time?
Well, yeah, you don't be acknowledged very often as a ninth grader, but I can field hockey, obviously, and gymnastics. So it was uh, a small school, and so the competition wasn't that great, but I enjoyed every activity that I could get involved with and participated and represented the school. Dennis O'Connor out of Whitby. They've now moved to Ajax, but it was a fun experience, and I had great teachers that encouraged me to participate in all sports, and I was a good young athlete to begin with, so it was a real uh, opportunistic uh, event in my life to get involved in student government and student theater and sports. So it was a very small school, as I said, but they give you an opportunity to be involved in a lot of different things.
So after high school, it's onward to St. Lawrence University, national title at the University of Toronto. The college route worked out pretty well for you, didn't it?
Yeah, it did. It was a great debate in our family because my mother, who had a big influence on our family, and my father as well, but my mother pushed for education, and my father was supportive. But I was ready to play for the Oshawa Generals at the time, and they were expecting me to come back and play for them. And I decided I was still at junior eligibility, so I decided to go to St. Lawrence University, which was a great opportunity to pursue my education. And then when I graduated from there, I went to the University of Toronto. A great story. I just come back from, and people would probably appreciate this. Cliff Fletcher invited me to the first camp for the Atlanta Flames. So I went there. They wanted to sign me to the minors. I said, no, I'm going to go back to grad school at the University of Toronto. And I walked into Tom Watt's office. I didn't introduce myself to Tom prior to that. And Miss Lee, who was the assistant for all the coaches in varsity sports, and I asked if I could speak to Tom. Tom come out and said, "Hi, Tom. My name's Mike Keenan. I just got back from uh, Atlanta Flames training camp, and I'd like to try out for your team." And he says, "What do you play?" And I said, "What do you need?" He said, "Defense." I said, "I play defense." So the rest is history. I made the team, but I was fortunate both in all through my career. I played both forward and defense, depending on what the needs of the team were. But it worked out well. We won a national championship under Tom. We had many national championships, and I played with some great young players and notable people. Bruce Sterno was one of our goalies. He became a judge, and Kent Runke went on to the WHA, and Warren Anderson played for the Olympic team for Canada in 1980, and I could name several others. Gord Davies was our captain, was a draft by Boston Bruce. Bob Monroe played for the Voyageurs in Montreal, came back to U of T to be a dentist. So Al Milne was my defense partner, became a top dental surgeon in Manitoba. So it was, I could go on and on. Great, dedicated athletes, but also top students.
Well, you did get drafted by the WHA's Vancouver Blazers, and you went started your pro career at Roanoke, the Roanoke Valley Rebels. Here we go. Sounds like a real slapshot experience from the book. Of course, no helmet right here. What was the hardest thing to get used to moving on to the pro ranks and your time at Roanoke?
Well, it was a funny uh, introduction. I was out in Vancouver, went through the Okanagan Valley, playing a series of games, and then Phil Watson was the manager, signed me to um, Roanoke. Pieface McKenzie was the coach. Coley
Pie
Campbell,
face.
noted uh, NHL individual who
Yeah.
coached with me also in New York, was a player there, as well as other notables. But Jimmy Jones, who was with the Toronto Maple Leafs after that, played with me in Roanoke. So Les Jackson went on and became a real experienced scout and manager in the NHL. So it was a lot of interesting times. It did reflect quite a bit on the movie Slapshot. I met Paul Newman later. I was invited to the White House by Bill Clinton, and Paul was there as well. So I expressed that
Wow.
I enjoyed his uh, his movie, The Slapshot, but it was interesting enough. They wanted me to continue, and decided to go back to the University of Toronto, and then I went on to teach as well. So it was an interesting time. We won the
Well, yeah.
championship, by the way.
Oh, okay, that's pretty impressive. Well, and your numbers were impressive, by the way, as well. You're not just your offensive numbers, but the penalty minutes were up there too. I
Yeah.
noticed.
Yeah, it was, you had no choice. You had no choice. There was a fellow who was a real tough guy named Mike Panassi. He come over and challenged me, and he whacked me one and closed my eye instantly. And after the game, he says, "Great fight, Mike." I said, "Yeah, thanks. I can't see out of one eye." But that was just the way it was. You end up 100 plus minutes and penalties, and I think I had a point a game or more than a point a game. But it was an interesting experience. It was fun. It was actually fun.
Well, you mentioned you started coaching around your old hometown there, and that's where the aspirations of coaching began. When did you realize that this is something that you wanted to do full time?
Well, I came back after the minor pro experience and was coaching and playing in Whitby in Senior A again now. And there were a lot of former NHL WHA players on our team and in the league. And then I went to teach high school at Don Mills Collegiate. And I had played box lacrosse. Whitby, Oshawa is a hotbed for box lacrosse in Canada at that time. And they asked me if I would coach the lacrosse team in North York for Don Mills Collegiate. So I did. We won a championship. And that's really where I got the bug, the coaching bug. I said, I really enjoy being with these kids and helping them and making them better individual athletes and learning and teaching them how to play as a team. And I really, it was an experience that was inspiring for me that these kids could respond or young men could respond to um, the formation of a team and the formation of their skill set and their development as young students and also young athletes. So that's where I really started to tell myself or talk to myself and say, why don't you try this? You like it a lot. You're passionate about it. The kids respond to your teaching. So that's how it all got started.
Right, you mentioned the kids responding, so I guess that's gotta be, the thing that turns coaches on most, isn't it? The idea that, you can get the most out of these kids, they respond to what you had to offer, and, you took that to Peterborough, right?
Yeah, I think that coaching at the time, and maybe I hope it's the same for the young coaches. And I've had many coaches, managers in NHL that played for me, but it's a next best thing to playing. And you're standing on the bench, you're involved in the game at arm's length, and uh, that's that provides a lot of adrenaline as well, a lot of mixed emotions and responses, and it's
Mhm.
a great profession uh, for the coach because there's so many aspects that you have to be capable of handling in terms of teaching the game of hockey, the skill set, the skating skill set, the puck skill set, the physical aspect of training, the emotional aspect, the mental training, uh, the socialization of the team building. There's so many components to coaching that I found extremely interesting and enjoyed, and that's what you have to be able to do and take the pressures and expectations as you grow and you become from a minor league coach is a different animal than coaching professional. You're there to teach and guide children and make sure they enjoy and have fun. But in pro, I felt that the objective, and most owners would agree, is to win. And that is the context of that position is quite a bit different than minor hockey. I hope that minor hockey coaches have that in the forefront of their teaching, that the children first and foremost enjoy it and have fun participating.
So, you're recruited by Scotty Bowman to coach in Rochester, and you mentioned the book, he saw some of himself in you. What do you think, were those similarities between you and Scotty?
Well, I think that his background was quite the same as mine. He was injured as a player. I was injured as a player. And he went into coaching. The dynamics of the way he coached his bench management probably I reflected those skills more than any other skill that he would recognize in a young coach like myself at the time. So I think I had a great instinct for the game and during the game itself, and the preparation of the game, of course, is important, but bench management is extremely important at the professional level as well.
Scotty, let's bring you back in here for a second. Knew, obviously you worked around Bowman as well, and you are they cut from the same cloth, Mike and Scotty?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of similarities. As Mike mentioned, they were both, when you talk to the former players, they both tell you that they were the best bench coaches they'd ever played for. Very intense, very demanding, uh, pushed the standards very, very high. But it was all about winning, and both of them were obsessed with winning, and maybe at times to a fault, but both very successful. So I think there were similarities in how they ran and organized their teams, but also in the standards that they put forth to push their players to be better.
Yeah, and Mike, you mentioned the owners kind of like that when the team's winning, right? So it's
So do the fan base.
yeah, fan base too.
Everyone enjoys winning at the professional level, as I said, and I want to couch it a bit in terms of the young coaches that are aspiring to move up and coach at different levels. There is a big difference between handling children and handling men, and this is their livelihood. So you have a responsibility to a lot of families and a lot of people, including the players themselves, their families, and the team, the organization, the owners, and the fan base. And then you are in a very competitive environment where and now there's 32 teams trying to do the same thing as you are. So you have to find a way of separating yourself from those other teams and step by step make the playoffs and then have a winning formula to win ultimately whatever the prize is, whether it's the Stanley Cup, the University Cup, the Calder Cup, the Memorial Cup, whatever the standard is. Uh, you have to set your sights on that goal and what your requirements would be to achieve that goal.
I think
Well, you
Joe.
rewarded. Sorry, go ahead, Scotty.
I was just going to say a similarity between Scotty and Mike is that obviously both very successful in many stops and at many levels. But the one thing they worked hard on players, they pushed players, but it was about making sure if you're a fourth line player, that's okay, that's who you are. But you've got to be the best fourth line player you can be. You have to play to your potential. And I think not to put words in Mike's mouth, but what frustrated him with players and why he pushed certain players at times was to make sure that they played to their potential, to play that they had a certain level of ability. Make sure you got all that ability out of you. Don't leave it on the table. And I think that's one of the things that made both of them, but certainly in the case talking about Mike, a great coach as he was able to get players to sort of fulfill what abilities they had.
Right, and there's always different ways to do that, isn't there, Mike? I mean, there's not everybody responds to
Well,
the
the
same.
methodology is it can be
Yeah,
completely different. There was a lot of methodology between Bowman and I that were quite. Uh, I've often been asked, "What regrets would you have?" And I said, "Well, I'd live by my principles, but I probably could have uh, organized my methodology a little bit better." I guess that's a polite way of saying it. So turn the heat down. You could probably get the same results and not have the temperature up so high. But Scott mentioned, I was obsessed with winning, and Bowman made a recommendation to Bobby Clark at one time when I was going to coach in Philadelphia. Bobby called Scotty and said, "What about Keenan? Tell me something about him." And he said, "Well, I don't know anybody else in the world that hates to lose as much as he does." So, and of course, Bob Clark everyone knows how much he hated to
Right.
lose. He said, "That's good enough for me." So Bob ended up hiring me in Philadelphia as my first GM.
Well, let's talk about that. So, you know, you're cracking the big time, getting the Flyers job, and as you mentioned, Scotty gave you that recommendation, and Bob Clark hired you. At that particular time, you were coming off. You went to Rochester and then the University of Toronto. That's not exactly the route that most coaches take to the NHL. But how did it help you?
Well, back
How
then
did
that was
that?
very unusual. I had coached junior hockey in Peterborough, then went to the American League with the expectations of trying to learn as much about pro hockey as I could and move on to the NHL. At the time, Scotty gave me a 3-year contract to protect myself a little bit against leaving a high school, a very elite high school in Toronto, Forest Hill.
Mhm.
And we had some success in Rochester, but at the end of my contract, I looked at the men that were coaching in Buffalo, Scotty, Roger Nielsen, Jimmy Roberts, and Red Berenson. I said to myself, I really would like an opportunity, but I respect those people so much. It's not going to happen here in Buffalo. And Scotty wanted me to go back to Rochester. And I said, Scotty, I've learned as much as I can about the American League and being prepared to coach young players that are aspiring to be pro. And then University of Toronto contacted me, Gib Chapman, who was the athletic director at the time, and Liz Hoffman, who also was intercollegiate athletic coordinator, director. They contacted me, and I went to the University of Toronto. Now, when they offered me a contract there, I was the highest paid college coach in Canada, and then I went to meet with Bob Clark about the Flyer job, and he offered me a $5,000 raise over what I was making at University of Toronto. My father-in-law at the time, a very academic background family, who my sister-in-law was chairman of the English department in the University of Calgary. My brother-in-law was dean of dentistry at University of Toronto, and my wife was uh, a graduate as well. So he said, "What are you doing going to the NHL for $5,000 and the risk?" I said, "I want to try it." So that's basically how that all unfolded.
Well, it is kind of the NHL. Scotty, back. I want to bring you back again. Like, what do you think Mike drew from his experience that aided him, that maybe even gave him an advantage over some other coaches, and the route that he took to the NHL?
Yeah. Well, I mean, again, it was experience at all levels, going up from minor hockey to the high school to junior hockey to the American League. So he was paying his dues. But the one thing about Mike is he was, in many ways, ahead of his time in terms of preparing his teams for, what they did off the ice in terms of preparation and all of that type of thing, and monitoring what ice times were, having video involved in it, which was slightly ahead of the time back then. So he was in many ways a pioneer in a lot of his coaching methods.
Right, learning from a guy like Roger Nielsen helps, of course. 2 trips to the Stanley Cup final in 3 years, with the Flyers, and you won the Jack Adams Award, a couple playoff losses to the Oilers, but, how close do you think you got there? And that's kinda instant success. Did you find that it might have got to your head a little bit? Did you think, you
No,
were
I don't think it did. But when I went to Philadelphia, Mr. Snyder owned the club. He said, "If you can make the playoffs with this team, I'll kiss your butt at center ice." And we win the we win the President's Trophy and go to the Stanley Cup Finals. But we had a real, and Scott just mentioned it, a coaching staff that was unlike any other team in the league. We had assistant coaches Ted Sater and EJ McGuire, God bless him,
Mm.
on the ice, and then we had Billy Barber, skills coach, Bernie Bront, goalie coach, Pat Croce, fitness coach. We had sports psychologist and Cal Botterill. We had time on ice. We had a very collective group. Mike Finicchiaro did the video, and we had a collective group of professionals that were teaching and coaching a really young group, the youngest group in pro sport, not just hockey, but they were hungry, they were receptive, and they learned a lot in their own development and grew as a team in that first year. Of course, a major setback the second year, Pele Lindbergh was killed in a car accident. And then the third year, uh, we were decimated with injuries, but we had grown enough to take a superior team. I had one Hall of Famer, Mark Hell. They had seven in Edmonton, and the greatest players in the world ever. Wayne Gretzky leading the group, and Mark Messier, and all the other Hall of Famers, plus uh, their experience of winning. And we didn't have Timmy Kerr, a goal a game player, but we took him to 7 games. Hextall wins the Conn Smythe, but you never know what would have happened if we were healthy. All their top players were healthy and played, not ours weren't. But that's part of what it takes to get there and to succeed. And that particular year, the NHL is a little bit more generous with their time because of television now, but it was preset. We played 26 games in 52 nights in playoff hockey. So you talk about mental toughness and character and competitiveness that was instilled in and we had the members of our team were, I'm very proud of them even today. They were extremely committed to each other and to the team and to compete together.
A phenomenal accomplishment when you consider, the injuries you had, the team you're playing against. And of course, in 1987, you got a chance to coach the whole works, right? Some of those great players in the world, uh, including Mario Lemieux, of course, who you said, you know, Lemieux became a player as a result of that series. What were the greatest factors in Mario's development?
Well, I think one of the greatest factors was Wayne Gretzky. Wayne
Mm,
Gretzky was 26 years old, and Mario was a young, I believe Scott was Mario 20, 21. And he hadn't won yet in NHL, but Wayne uh, really guided and I think gave Mario some insights into being a superstar for 2 accounts. One, to make our team better, and I think Wayne also needed somebody or wanted somebody to push him in the NHL subsequently, which Mario did, and of course, until he had some health issues. But uh, the dynamics of that group, and as I said to Scott during the writing of the book, I'm a real genius. I think I cut about 10 Hall of Famers, but um, he also kept probably a dozen or so Hall of Famers. So that's a and kind of Scott outlined it earlier that you had to find the Hall of Famers that wanted to have a role, not to be given the top minutes that they would be given in their respective teams, but to be able to accept a role in a defensive role or a checking role or penalty killer, whatever the case might be, to integrate themselves into the team concept because it's ultimately a team game. And we're playing a team that was preparing for the Soviet Union, who we thought we would end up playing, and that was our expectations. So it turned out to be one of the greatest series of hockey ever, and very dramatic the way it all unfolded, the 6-5, 6-5, 6-5 overtime victories, and then the final game in the last closing couple of minutes. So, our preparation was about 6 weeks, maybe, and theirs
right.
was 11 months.
Yeah. It's a different situations. Scotty, what are your thoughts on what Mike was talking about preparing? And
Well, I think the challenge with that at the time with that '87 team was you had guys coming from different teams that were very competitive and didn't like each other, and you had to kind of bridge that gap. You had a bunch of Flyers and a bunch of Oilers that had played against each other, a bunch of Montreal Canadiens, And similarly, in '84, they had problems with that team pulling it all together because you had the Oilers who didn't like the Islanders, and the Canadians didn't like whatever other the Rangers. And I remember in that '84 series, it was Larry Robinson and Bobby Bourne from the Islanders. Larry, obviously with Canadians, stood up when they were playing the Soviets in the semifinal and just said, "Okay, we get it. I don't like you, you don't like me, but we're all playing for the same crest now, and it's playing for our country." And Mike, I think, had a challenge to that degree with the '87 team, but was very clever in terms of what he did during the training camp of putting, a Rick Tocchet staying with or rooming with a Mark Messier or a Gretzky, and having the Flyers and the Oilers and the various different teams mix and
Right.
match, so you didn't have your cliques.
Yeah. Good stuff. So, you did have. Go ahead, Mike. You're going to comment on that.
No, I was just saying that they came together. We had some hurdles overcome, but great leadership in the room, and when the best players uh, see what the objective is and are clear about it, then it makes it easier for the group to come together, and that was the case in '87 for sure.
Right. And
And
you
the
had
one
some
thing
tough. Go ahead. Yeah. Sorry, Scotty.
I was just going to say, and the one thing that happened during that tournament, trying to pull that team together, is Mike pissed them off early in that tournament. Their opening game was a 4-4 tie in Calgary with the Czechoslovakia, and Mike kept the players away from the families after the game, and who had just all reunited in during the training camp out in Banff. And but the whole thing was to get the message across that you've got to be focused, that this is anything less than winning is not good enough in Canada when you're playing at that level. And so, in many ways, by pissing them off and the players got angry, they went to Alan Eagleson and complained about some of the tactics that Mike was employing. But that brought the group together, and Mike and the star players, the leaders of that team, had frank and candid conversations and pulled together. So it just shows you that the Gretzky's, the Messiers, the Ray Borks, they were tremendous players, but they were also tremendous leaders and understood what was on the line and what Mike was trying to accomplish.
Yeah, Mike, you had some tough decisions to make in goal. You decided to go with Grant Fuhr over your own guy Ron Hextall, who had won the Conn Smythe and Vesna and everything else, and so was that a difficult choice for you to
Not really. I had to set my mind and explained it to the goalies that Grant would and had earned the opportunity, won the Stanley Cup. Uh, he demonstrated so many times what a great goalie he was, and he deserves that opportunity. And I said, if he really falters, then somebody else has to be ready to step up. But from the beginning, and that's the one position that you can do that and identify your goalie, which I did early, and told the group of goalies at the time what the plan was, and they could either accept it or not, and that's how that was played out, really.
it worked out okay. Fuhr made some big saves in that series, obviously. You okay? So another decision you made is to play Gretzky and Lemieux together, which that's not exactly balancing your lines with the two greatest players in the world. What was the thinking behind that?
Well, I was thinking, and I'm at my cottage right now. I was sitting here in July of that particular summer and thinking, how can we find a difference? We're going to play an unbelievable team. At least our expectation was to play the Soviet Union. And I didn't want to show it early in the tournament. I showed it a little bit from time to time on the power play, but I knew that they were exceptional, skilled players. And talk about roles, I had Mark Messier, Mike Gardner playing right wing, Glenn Anderson playing left wing, and that was the checking line to go against Larionov. So
Wow.
I had thought about various combinations and various scenarios that we would see from each team that we played, but in particular from the Soviet Union. And I made up my mind. I didn't discuss it with anyone, including the coaching staff and or the players, but waited until it became an important point and advantageous for us to show the world, to show the Soviets that they were going to be put together, and the dynamics of the and their skill set of the two of them together and others playing with them was the difference maker.
Yep, and if you hadn't have put that combination together, we wouldn't have had the moment that we had back in 1987. Let's roll that video, Vic. A minute and a half to go in the game. Dale Howarchuk is in there now to take the draw, and of course, in the Canadian zone, wins it. Let's pick up the legendary call from Dan Keller. What a moment. I mean, it still gives me goosebumps. How about you?
Yeah, it was a special. I like to tell the story though, and we've talked about it. Scott and I said, Wayne said Murph was leading up, and we had two offensive defensemen out at the same time, Coffey and Murph. And Wayne says, "There's no way I'm going to give it to Murph. I'll use him as a decoy."
Well, and tell him the story, Mike, of the face-off.
Yeah. So I call the three of them, and Mess expected me to call him for this important defensive zone face-off. But I was thinking about winning the game first and foremost then, and they had their fourth unit out, which was less experienced, and I knew they would come back with Larionov, so I wanted to save Mess for Larionov, because it's exactly what happened after we scored the goal. But the three centermen go out there, and Gretz says, "Well, I'm not taking it." And Mario said, "Well, it's on the wrong side for me." And Howie said, "Well, I guess I'm going to take it." So that's how they decided. As they were leaving the bench to go out, because I never said to them, Dale, you take the face off. I let them decide.
No. Right. Three great centers like that. You let them decide. Okay, so after the game, you were interviewed by our old pal Dan Matheson. Let's roll that.
Our players, you have to be particularly proud of them being able to come back from a deficit such as that against such a great team. You have to be proud of these guys and our team representing Canada.
What brought them back? When it was 4-2, the Soviets had got off to such a quick start. What was it that brought them back?
I think it was just composure and a sense of confidence amongst themselves. They've had that throughout the tournament, and that composure helped them keep a stable attitude throughout the game, and as a result, we won it on some individual talent that came through for us, but the overall posture of the team was very, very calm and collected, and that was important. They didn't get down when they were down by a couple of goals.
Michael, they're not too composed now. Congratulations. Thank you very much. Have some fun now. Wayne, get on in here.
Yeah, there you go. There's a good moment. Yeah. What was that like?
Those are interesting clips. I am enjoying seeing them. I haven't seen them since maybe ever.
The one thing we talked about, Mike, in the book is that in that final game when you were down to the Soviets early, that it was the grinders that got you back into the game, and then it was the superstars who won it.
Yeah, we changed the tactics, and Tikhonov was looking over in the bench and saying, "Oh, this guy's crazy. He benched Lemieux and Gretzky." But Gretz turned to me and said, "I need a little bit of a break." Like, he had played to exhaustion, as many of the other players. And then we put out the Tockets, the props, the Sutters. We call them the grinders, and they were exceptional players on their own teams, but they had a different style, and it also disrupted what the expectation of Tikhonov and his team had built into their preparation. So it was a different tactic, and it worked out for us. Scott, I think we were down by 3 goals in about 11 minutes, and we were able to overcome that and come back and of course, win late in the game.
Yeah, what a great moment. That was, yeah, one of the greatest I can recall. It's fantastic. Right up there with 72. So you move on to Chicago after Philadelphia, uh, and that's where you got the nickname Iron Mike. Is it because you got rid of the ashtrays in the dressing rooms? I
That
think I
might have been
laughed out
part of
loud.
it, but it was mainly because of, probably my coaching style and demeanor. Mike Ditka was huge in Chicago. They won the Super Bowl. Phil Jackson was coaching the Bulls. Um, and Michael, of course, Michael Jordan was a fierce competitor. I don't know if people understand how challenging he was with his teammates, but the name Iron surfaced because of Ditka, I think, and it
Mhm.
stuck with me from that point on.
And in Chicago, Doctor Hook was at it again, and we have some more video of you. An incident with Eddie Belfour. Now you talked about this in the book. You pulled Eddie, but the confrontation on the bench, he tugged at his jersey, and there's something going on here. What exactly happened there?
Well, I replaced Eddie, and he wasn't happy about it, obviously. But I had a conversation with him before the season, and at the time, many coaches were playing goalies 50% each. And I asked him, would you like to play 75, 80%? He said, absolutely, yes. So as he was upset on the bench, I went down and reminded him. I said, do you remember the conversation we had? He said, yes. I said, right there, I'm saying to you, you remember the conversation? He said, yes. I said, so be quiet. So that was the end of that.
Yeah, it looked like it was more serious than it was, I guess, but it worked out pretty good. I mean, Chicago, great success. You got, I think you made it to the Final Four 3 times. You made it to the Stanley Cup final in 4 years. What a great run that was in Chicago.
Yeah, it really was. And it was a team building opportunity. I was now the manager and was able to acquire some special players and the development of some of our younger players, including Eddie. I had sent Eddie away twice, said you weren't ready for the NHL. That restricted our chances, but we had to be patient in the development. And then the arrival of Roenick, for example, and Goulet. Larmer was a great player as our top
Mm.
line. I don't want to single out everyone. Chris Chelios, the acquisition for Dennis Savard because of Roenick's skill set to be able to become a number one centerman was huge in the development of our team. Chris had a huge impact on the competitive values, and the acquisition of the Sutter brothers, Dwayne and Brent. So I think that I could go on and on. Steve Smith became a partner. Igor Kravchuk became the first of Christios. Igor became the first Russian to ever play for the Blackhawks. We had some veterans that I kept around. Keith Brown was a great competitor on defense and made a lot of changes over time. But as you said, we went to the Final Four 3 of 4 years. We won the President's Trophy, went to finals, played 60 playoff games in 4 seasons. I think any fan base organization would enjoy that. So uh, we had a really excellent team in Chicago. We just ran into again a team that had several superstars on it in Pittsburgh, including Mario and Yager and Francis and Trottier and go on and Tom Barrasso and that. So again, I'm pretty proud of that team in Chicago. Very proud of the team in Chicago as well.
Yeah, and that your experience in Chicago eventually. I mean, that success didn't go unnoticed. The Rangers were really desperate for a win. I mean, it'd been 54 years since they won the Stanley Cup. And so they bring you on. What were the key factors in the Blue Shirts, trying to acquire your talents for the team?
It was an interesting process because, as we write in the book, Scott explains that I had turned down a couple opportunities with expansion teams in Anaheim, and then that was pursued a little bit by Buffalo. I went and had a visit with Mike Ilitch in Detroit, and he offered me to hold a spot for me until the season was over, for me to come to Detroit. Uh, we outlined that in the book. He gave me $150,000 to hold my spot, and they had a family dispute about it, so I sent him $150,000 back. Mr. Snyder tried to hire me, offered me a 5-year deal, said that he made a mistake, which would be a big swallow for an owner, and was ready to make me the coach in charge of player personnel. And then I end up being pursued by the Rangers, ultimately signing there. And then our first meeting, I knew we had a chance because I showed a parade that was held in New York City with a championship of one of the baseball teams. I think it was the
Canyon
Yankees.
Heroes. Yeah.
And that moment, I looked down at Mark, who was sitting in the front row about 15 feet from me, and he had tears in his cheeks. And after I asked, "What's the story?" and he said, "Nobody's talked about winning the Stanley Cup. I came here to win the Stanley Cup." So I knew right then we had a chance. We had to make a lot of decisions in terms of personnel and make the team, grow the team, make the team bigger, stronger, because the opposing teams that we'd face, as I said, there's always other teams that are set to do the same thing as you. So that was a real important moment in the development of our team right from day one.
Yeah, you knew Messier was going to be the guy, right? He having Mess supporting you, having Mess on side, and having Mess, when he gets that look in his eye and he wants to, determined, he hop on board, fellas. We're going for a ride. So, 1940 was the last time the Rangers had won the Stanley Cup. Tell us about that 7-game tilt with the Canucks. At times it looked like you had this thing wrapped up, and they kept fighting back.
Yeah, well, you have to give them credit. They had come a long way. They had defeated some teams that they weren't expected to defeat in their journey to get to the finals, and then we had the opportunity to win at home, and the media, the fan base were way ahead of themselves. They end up beating us, and ultimately we come back for Game 7, and when we set out, as I just described in the first meeting, our goal is to win the Stanley Cup. And a brief synopsis of the talk that I gave them 2 days prior to the game is, if anybody would say back in September that we could play for the Stanley Cup in Madison Square Gardens in Game 7, would we take it? Obviously, the answer was yes, without question. So, but it was marginal, as was the case in New Jersey. But that's what it is. That's what the Stanley Cup takes to be successful. It's really a small degree of difference, usually between teams, and we found the difference in that particular night. Our team was very confident. We had great leadership. Our best players stepped up, and we were able to succeed and win the cup under stress and the expectations, and the fan base now was extremely nervous. But our our leadership group withstood those pressures and performed, and we were able to win the cup.
Did you tell anybody before Game 7, "Hey guys, we don't want any guarantees here tonight for this"?
No, we'd already gone through that hurdle.
Yeah. Well, what was it like? Because you finally get the job done. You finally win the Stanley Cup after coaching some pretty good teams and coming so close. What did that feel like to finally get a chance to lift the cup?
Well, it was an exceptional experience because I'd never seen a captain skate and give the coach the trophy. So as Mark was skating towards me, I'm saying to myself, what is he doing? And then when he handed it to me, I lifted like a feather. I thought the roof was going to blow off Madison Square Gardens. That's my daughter taking films of me right there,
Oh,
and
yeah.
Rob Campbell on the bench. I think that's Tom Greenaway as well. But it felt like a feather. But I'll tell you exactly what went through my mind. I said to myself, this is one bloody hard trophy to win. And that was a poignant moment, but a special moment because it is very, very difficult to win the Stanley Cup.
Yeah, and that's what it's all about, isn't it? Yeah, getting that opportunity to finally lift that cup is something that very few coaches get to experience. And that's the series this year reminded me a little bit of that series in '94 where the Panthers had a chance to wrap it up and wrap it up and wrap it up. They ended up going to Game 7 again, but it was the same thing. I think it's like Maurice borrowed your line because I think in that series on Netflix or Prime or whatever it is, he said to the guys, "Listen, if I had told you back in beginning of the season we'd be playing at home for Game 7, Stanley Cup final, you guys would have taken that." So,
I
yeah,
didn't realize he did that, but that's
yeah,
exactly a great way of framing it for your team and your players to give them the confidence and let them go out and go after the victory. So you can't have any fear at that point. And the responsibility of the coach is try to set that mood, uh, set that mental vision for them to see them winning the cup. And Paul did a good job doing that. And I'm going to be interested to see how the teams respond. It's a copycat, copycat,
copycat, copycat,
copycat. Yeah, my
copycat. Yeah.
dyslexia is bothering me this morning. And uh, to see if they shape their teams based on that aggressive, physical, kind of old school type of play.
What do you think about that, Scott? Do you think that's the route today?
Well, if you look at, Vegas has had success and they're a big team on the back end, big and mean, and Florida certainly played that aggressive style. And I think one of the interesting stories about the '94 Rangers is they were first overall in the league leading up to the trade deadline and made 5
Mm.
moves at the trade deadline, replaced a quarter of their roster because Mike didn't feel that the team had the kind of grit and the proper depth to get through the grind of the playoffs, and especially that third round against the New Jersey Devils, who were a big, tough team, and it proved to be right. But you don't see it very often that successful teams overhaul their roster at a deadline leading into the playoffs.
Yeah. Yeah, and you knew you had to do that, eh, Mike? You knew that those pieces were missing.
Just from my experience, as I'd been to the Cup 3 times prior to that, and understood the needs of what it takes to win the Stanley Cup, and I just expressed the the experience that I had that we have to be bigger, stronger, more experienced to withstand the physical aspect of this journey. I mean, the playoffs can last 2 months, and also the experience you need to withstand the pressures of an environment at the time like New York City was infamous
Mhm.
everywhere. Every other night around New York, we're hearing 1940, 1940. So it didn't really resonate with our team, our players, but it was certainly a part of what we had to overcome.
And you weren't finished with champions. You had one more in the KHL. And tell us about your experience in okay, got to get this name right. It's the
Magnitogorsk,
Magnitogorsk. Yes.
Magnitogorsk, yeah. It was a really great experience. A call out of the blue. I solicited Mike Polino, who had played for me and coached with me, to come with me and had coaching experience at various levels as well. And the one thing I did say to him when we were going is that, Mike, it's so important that we understand the culture, and that it's not for them to understand us. It's better to understand than to be understood. And that was very important because we were going to an environment in Ural Mountains. Nobody could speak English. 5 players on the team could speak English. The others could not. We had to the support of Ilya Vrovev, who's now coaching and still coaching in the league, who was fluent in English but was from Russia. And that process also involved to adapt as coaches to play on a larger ice surface, 15 feet wider. So the strategy and tactics are different. But we managed to develop that team as well. It needed a lot of overhaul to begin with, and then we were able to take it to a game 7, to win the first championship for non-Russian coaches. But the team bought into what we tried to accomplish and what we did over the course of the season, and we learned to win. And we played the Czech Republic at the time, so there was a huge rival there, as well as not just hockey, but the politics involved. So it was a great experience, and one that captured the imagination of a mid-sized city of 500,000 people who were all steelworkers. And the parade we had there was quite different than the parade we had in New York. The parade there involved a visit to the factory of 60,000 employees. So it was in the middle of nowhere, but it still was. Being as when you win, it draws your team together and your people and your support staff and your players that experience something that lasts a lifetime.
And you've had health issues. You had the aneurysm, which I didn't know about until I read the acknowledgments, and prostate cancer. But health is good today.
Very good. I was in good hands with great doctors, great teams. Dr. Girardi, a Presbyterian in New York, open heart surgery, and Hans Chung and Sunnybrook and his team with prostate cancer. So feeling great and fortunate that I'm sitting here talking to you.
Yeah, awesome. We have a group we're sponsoring. They're partnering within the show. It's called Believe, Become, Be You. It's a mentorship program for kids 10 to 17. What message would you have for kids who might be, struggling to find their way today, Mike?
You have to have belief and hope and confidence in your own self, and faith that that the big dreams you have can come to fruition, that can come to be a reality for you if you believe and have faith in yourself, and you have guidance, and you learn and listen from your mistakes, because we all make big mistakes. And it's not what happens to you, it's how you respond to what happens to you that's most important.
Wow, it's great. Okay, guys. Well, thank you so much. The book, once again, here we are. Iron Mike Keenan, My Life Behind the Bench, with Mike Keenan and Scott Morrison. Guys, this has been fantastic. I really appreciate you taking the time to join us. And the book is terrific. Really, really enjoyed it. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks very much for having us.
All right. Thanks, guys. When we come back, we're going to talk about the dragon as he roars in Quebec and more. See you in a bit.
Addiction Rehab Toronto, Toronto's #1 alcohol and drug treatment center, saving lives, reuniting families. The only treatment center in the province to offer medical detox, treatment, sober living, and lifetime aftercare all in one place. Our unique and specialized programs are designed to equip our clients with the tools to successfully lead a life of dignity, respect, and purpose. Let us help save your life or your loved one's life. Call today for more information or to facilitate an intervention. 1-855-787-2424 or visit addictionrehabtoronto.ca.
Steve the Dragon Claggett is back and he's breathing fire again. After a tough loss to Teofimo Lopez in June, the 35-year-old Calgary brawler wasn't about to let that slow him down, not one bit. This week in Gatineau, Quebec, he faced off against Uruguay's Eduardo Estella. And let's just say, Estella probably wishes he'd picked a different vacation spot. From the opening bell, Claggett was in full dragon mode with that relentless attack. Estella barely had time to blink, let alone breathe, before Claggett started landing some nasty combinations. By round 3, Estella found himself picking up real estate on the canvas, courtesy of some brutal body shots. Then, like a guy late for a meeting, Claggett decided to wrap things up in the 4th, rattling Estella's chin and sending him home early with his 27th knockout victory. Claggett improves to 39-8-2. This rate, a title shot might be closer than Estella's next ice pack.
Parents, what's the biggest fear for kids 10 to 14? A future they think they can't handle. At Believe, Become, Be You, we know confidence in the future is a habit we can build. Our course doesn't just prepare kids for the future, it seeds them with skills they will use now. For a limited time, the I Believe in Me Foundation is offering the first 1,000 kids and their parents 1 year free access. This priceless opportunity will save you over $2,000. This isn't just a course. It's a journey in developing life-enhancing skills that will grow with your child, fostering gritty minds, creative futures, and better bonds. Get signed up now at BelieveBecomeBeYou.com. That's BelieveBecomeBeYou.com.
Hi, I'm Joe Tilley, and I want to tell you about the painting pros. Patrick and his crew recently came into my home and they painted the walls, they added some color. It's fantastic, and I can't be more satisfied with the work they did. That crew is tremendous. They were professional, they were courteous, they were respectful, and they did a fantastic job. Look at that. Look at that color. I just can't stress enough how satisfied we truly are with Patrick and his crew. For all your painting needs, go with the pros.
And we want to thank all the folks who make the show possible. These are friends, trusted business associates, and all-around great people. We highly recommend them all. Thank you for your support of Canadian sports. A reminder that the show is available on iTunes, Spotify, Breaker, and wherever you get your podcast from. Also, check out the show on YouTube. All of our past shows are on there. Shorts, clips, like and subscribe. It's absolutely free. Thank you once again to Mike Keenan and Scott Morrison for being on the program. Thank you for watching. We'll see you next time.
Brian Gribben Insurance Planning, helping you solidify your financial future.
At BGIP, what we do that's unique in the marketplace is we show people how to spend and enjoy their money in the early years of retirement without the fear of running out. Also, we're able to do this without you having to change financial advisors. Please look us up at bgip.ca today. Let's book a 30-minute phone call to see how we can bring value to you and your family in your planning.
Call Brian today for all your retirement needs. We did. 905-686-5678.
MNP, a leading Canadian national accounting, tax, and business accounting firm. MNP proudly serves and responds to the need of their clients in the private, public, and nonprofit sectors. Through partner-led engagements, MNP provides a collaborative, cost-effective approach to do business and personal strategies to help people and organizations to succeed across the country and around the world. With local offices in Oshawa, Mississauga, Burlington, and more, their team is here to support you. Visit mnp.ca today to learn more. Rooted in 60 years of tradition, Sleepy Hollow is a private golf club with a friendly community of members just minutes from Toronto. With mature trees and rolling fairways, Sleepy Hollow provides a challenging and enjoyable experience for passionate golfers. Enjoy great golf, amazing dining, and a picturesque patio second to none. Visit SleepyHollowCountryClub.com. Joe Tilley here. My wife Penny Claire and I recently took an amazing trip to Egypt and Jordan with Trip Oppo. And here are our top 10 must-dos. Last but not least, we relaxed at a luxury resort and took a dip in the famous Dead Sea. This beautiful resort was a perfect way to cap off our incredible adventure in Egypt and Jordan. After days of exploring ancient ruins and bustling markets, it was wonderful to just kick back, put on a little mud, and soak up the sun by the Dead Sea. Oh, I almost forgot to mention the amazing cuisine in Egypt and Jordan. Don't forget to try the delicious local food like mouth-watering Egyptian barbecue. And the best part is that our Trip Oppo tour includes almost all of the meals, so you can indulge in the local cuisine without worrying about opening your wallet. I would highly recommend that you book your next trip through Trip Oppo. Call them today.
Guests on Joe Tilley Sports receive a gift certificate from Classica Imports. Top of the line imported men's clothing. Check out the Classica Essential Collection now. Go to shopclassica.com.